Welcome to Neff Video's production of the CSX Henderson Sub. Our starting location is downtown Nashville, Tennessee. The first train you will see is R121, which is a trailer train that runs between Chicago, Illinois and Jacksonville, Florida. And the second train at the same location is R124, which is also a TV train running in the reverse direction between Jacksonville and Chicago. The Henderson Sub has a combination of frequent trains, good access, interesting connections, and a variety of rural and urban backgrounds. In addition to over 25 scheduled trains a day, there are several daily unit coal movements, both north and south, from Atkinson Yard in Madisonville, Kentucky. The Henderson Sub will also see at least one and usually more grain trains each day. Two short lines interchange with CSX on the Henderson Sub, the Paducah and Louisville Railway and the R.J. Corman Railroad. Later in the program, we'll take a closer look at these operations. Prior to the acquisition of this line by the L&N, now CSX, in 1879, the property belonged to the St. Louis and Southeastern, including the Kentucky and Tennessee divisions. The line ran from Nashville, Tennessee to Henderson, Kentucky. Predecessor roads were the Henderson and Nashville, which was charted in 1837, and was later the Evansville, Henderson, and Nashville. The H&N was completed in 1871 and was sold in 1872 to the St. Louis and Southeastern. The trackage between Guthrie and Nashville was originally the Edgefield and Kentucky. The trackage was operated briefly in 1872 as the Nashville, Chicago, and St. Louis before becoming the Tennessee division of the St. Louis and Southeastern. All this trackage was built at 5-foot gauge. The line from Amqui, Tennessee to Henderson, Kentucky is a single-track railroad with passing sidings at Goodlettsville, Cortland, and Cedar Hill in Tennessee, and at Guthrie, Trenton, Caskey, Latham, Kelly, Nortonville, Hanson, Robards, and Breton in Kentucky. There are numerous talking detectors along the main line to keep you posted on approaching traffic. Amqui, located at milepost 176.8, is the junction where the Henderson Sub from Evansville meets the former L&N Louisville division from Louisville, Kentucky. This line enters from the northeast. You'll notice numerous scanners and floodlights here as automated equipment record car numbers of trains entering Nashville. Grain train G191 comes south through the junction led by two GE AC locomotives. AC locomotives on the Henderson Sub are very rare. The traffic flow here used to be controlled by a tower until 1977. The tower was closed and subsequently purchased by Johnny Cash, who had moved it to Hendersonville, Tennessee, and restored it on the grounds of the House of Cash music shop. A burro crane approaches coming south off the Louisville line at Amqui. Goodlettsville is the first passing siding north of Amqui. The south end of the siding begins near milepost 180 and has capacity of 5,729 feet. A northbound grain train waits in the hole for the southbound R557. R557 is an Evansville to Nashville manifest. Observe that the first 5 cars in this train contain fresh railroad ties that were just picked up at the Guthrie Yard. The ties are chemically treated at the Coppers plant, which is adjacent to Guthrie Yard. Q645, which runs from Chicago to Nashville, seen rounding a curve just south of Ridgetop, Tennessee, near Baker Station. Q556, which runs from Nashville to Evansville, is observed heading north across Baker Station Road. The grade on Baker Hill approaches close to 1% northbound. Sometimes an extra unit is added at Nashville for northbound trains. Close on the heels of the previous train is R120, which is a Jacksonville, Florida to Chicago trailer train. Q645 is entering the approach to the north portal of Baker Tunnel through a rock cut. Baker Tunnel is the only tunnel on the Henderson Sub, and it runs under the town of Ridgetop, Tennessee. The bore is 4,621 feet in length. Access to the tunnel portals is very difficult and dangerous. Unless you enjoy the company of timber rattlesnakes, avoid the north portal. It is also advised to stay away from the south portal, as Grant Paul Jones of Hee Haw fame is a resident near the entrance and doesn't take kindly to unwanted visitors. Q556's headlight emerges from the north portal of the tunnel. Northbound Q596, which runs from Nashville to Chicago, crests the 0.97% grade at Greenbrier. After a short period of time, grain train symbol G134 approaches from the north at the same location. The grain facilities at Springfield, Tennessee are similar to the many other grain operations that dot the landscape along the Henderson Sub. The grain business plays an important part in the total business of this line. We see grain train G134 rolling by but not stopping to make a pickup at Springfield. Our camera location is on the Airport Road overpass near milepost 199, which is approximately 2 miles north of Springfield. R121 heads south, and our second camera will pick up the action as it heads across the Sulphur Fork Creek trestle. We're in the sleepy town of Adams, Tennessee. The village looks like a ghost town with rundown and roofless buildings. Q556 hustles by northbound and is descending a 3-mile-long grade of approximately 0.80%. R120's roll down the same hill will be short-lived because as soon as it spans the Red River Trestle north of Adams, it will encounter a 1-mile grade of 1% coming out of the Red River Valley. At a farm crossing just north of the Red River Trestle, we catch Q556 making a run for the grade. If you remember earlier, we said that R120 was nipping at the heels of Q556 on Baker Hill. Q556 was instructed to take the siding at Cortland so that the higher priority train R120 could run around. That's why Q556 is now behind R120 at this location. Detour train Q553 is observed heading south at Sadlersville. Normally, this train is routed from St. Louis to Louisville by the way of Vincennes, Indiana to Evansville, Indiana, to Henderson, Kentucky through Owensboro, Kentucky to Louisville. Today, this train has been routed down the Henderson Sub all the way to Nashville, Tennessee and back up the Louisville division. Q553 is seen again in twilight at Al Corder Road just south of Guthrie, Kentucky. Our location is Guthrie, Kentucky, which is situated on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. As a matter of fact, the state boundary bisects the yard here at the south end. The Copper's Tie treating plant is located here, as was mentioned earlier in the video. We see J722, the Guthrie to Hopkinsville local, working the yard towards the end of the day. UPS train R129 threads its way through the yard at Guthrie while J722 performs some last-minute work. Having completed its chores, CSX engine 6124 will head north through the yard and tie up for the day on the house track near the yard office. R.J. Corman's Memphis line, ex-CSX line from Bowling Green, Kentucky to Clarksville, Tennessee, connects with the CSX at Guthrie. Here we see R.J. Corman unit pulling cars out of the CSX yard. Likewise, the R.J. Corman crew is done for the day and will tie up for the night. R129 is an experimental dedicated United Parcel Service train from Chicago to Nashville, runs by our location at north of Trenton. The experiment was to see if the train could beat UPS's own tractor-trailer rigs between Chicago and Nashville. The train won the race, and now train symbols R128 and R129 are permanent fixtures on the Henderson Sub. X129, the second section of the previous train R129, rolls through the village of Trenton while a northbound TV train sits in the siding. Grain train G882 heads north across John Rives Road. This location is between Pembroke and Caskey at milepost 231. At the same location, we see J722, the Guthrie to Hopkinsville local, head north to Hopkinsville, Long Hood forward. On an extremely windy day, R123, a Chicago to Atlanta TV train, rushes by Caskey, Kentucky. At North Caskey, grain train G882 rumbles by the signal at the north end of the 7,928 long passing siding. Southbound grain train G134 pulls south past the beautiful station in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Hopkinsville doesn't have a yard as such, but many storage tracks can be found on the north side of town. There is a huge grain elevator located on the south side. Latham Siding is located just north of Hopkinsville. Grain train G011 enters the north switch of the 4,884-foot long passing siding. We move to the south end of the siding, where a green light indicates the approach of northbound TV train R122, which runs between Atlanta and Chicago. Our other camera crew has positioned themselves on a highway overpass north of Latham, and we see again R122 leaving town. Back at South Latham, R596 Nashville to Chicago rolls by. At the north end of Latham Siding, we again see R596. The rear of grain train G011 still waits patiently. With the meet with the two northbound empties complete, G011 now gets the signal to head out of the siding and continue south. A track car at Substation Road overpass south of Kelly, Kentucky whizzes by, followed by a southbound grain train symbol G553. R129 rounds the curve at the north end of Kelly Siding, which is 5,457 feet long. Grain train G553 rounds the curve and heads south under the Kavanaugh Road overpass. Likewise, R645 Chicago to Nashville heads south at the same location. Grain train G353 heads north across Gumlick Trestle, which stands 200 feet above the 600-foot wide Gumlick Hollow. This is the highest structure of its kind on the Henderson Sub and was pressed into service about 1913. We're at Crofton, Kentucky, where during steam days this was a key point for watering steamers such as J282s. A busy passenger depot was also located here. Today there are no traces left of the depot, but concrete footings of the town's two huge water towers still exist. R124 heads north through Crofton. R124 glides by our location at Mannington. A grade begins at Mannington on a stretched S-curve which has the tracks running east and west for nearly a half a mile. The climb here is at 0.55%, is not the toughest on the Henderson Sub, but heavy trains tend to lose speed in the curves. Since southbounds are obliged to enter these curves at reduced speed, friction does its work. This makes for occasional slow grinding runs all the way by the comparatively level ground at Crofton. At Romney, Kentucky, train R596 pulls by with some foreign power spliced into the middle of the consist. Our location is the former Nortonville Diamond, where the Illinois Central Gulf, now the Paducah and Louisville, once crossed to Louisville and Nashville, now CSX. The diamond has been cut out of the CSX main, but still lays nearby in case of future needs. Rye flourishes between the ties from the grain spilled from the passing grain cars. R129 approaches from the north. R645 crosses the site of the former diamond. R123 makes an appearance at two locations in the Nortonville area. R124 enters the towns of Morton's Gap from the south. we see the same train diverting onto the Arlington cutoff. The cutoff runs from Morton's Gap through the Atkinson Yard in Madisonville and reconnects with the main north of Madisonville. The cutoff was complete by the L&N in 1911. The old main runs through Arlington and downtown Madisonville. There are branch lines running both east and west of Madisonville. The West Branch runs to Providence and serves mines in the area as well as a connection with the Tradewater Railroad. The East Branch runs through Hartford, Central City, and Drakesboro, and a connection with Midwest Coal Handling and the TVA power plant at Paradise, Kentucky. R129 comes south on the Old Main, which runs through the towns of Madisonville and Arlington, while grain train G134 patiently waits on the Arlington cutoff. CSX used to refer to this junction as North Morton, but now just calls it plain Morton. The grain train waits for the switch to snap to its track so that it can get underway. R129, which we saw moments ago coming down the old main from Madisonville, slides through Earlington. We're at the P&L's West Yard on the west side of Madisonville. The Paducah and Louisville, or Powell Railroad as it's affectionately called, is the former ex-Illinois Central Kentucky Division and connects with the CSX at Atkinson Yard in Madisonville, Kentucky. A mine run is seen approaching the main. The train has just loaded at the Warrior Mine and is destined for the Louisville Gas and Electric Company. The switch is thrown by a circular hand crank instead of the conventional switch handle. Two light engines leave the yard and will couple onto the coal train for its trip to Louisville. A second coal train, this time originating at the Magic Mine at St. Charles, also heads to Louisville for barge loading on the Ohio River. It's nighttime, and we've been invited into the CSX Atkinson yard. On this night, it's relatively quiet. The mine pullers have done their work and are resting up for tomorrow's chores. Madisonville, needless to say, is the heart of CSX's Western Kentucky coal operations. Atkinson Yard is the staging area for this activity, as well as other endeavors such as grain and manufactured goods. The Atkinson Engine facility keeps a supply of motive power ready for outbound coal trains, as well as older semi-retired units for branch line duty, locals, and yard work. A car repair station was built here in the mid-70s to take care of bad order hoppers. Light repair and maintenance are performed on the diesels at an adjacent shop. The next day, the weather on our trip has taken a turn for the worse as we watch a Paducah and Louisville local enter Atkinson Yard. After backing its train into the yard, the local will uncouple and head back light to its own west yard to tie up for the day.
Authority number 23627, Henderson Sub, October 26, RJ Dot, MB 276, occupy main track north and south, and the Trident Hibbs Prominent Diamond Junction, 3 blocks, 11:12 until 12:30, D80. Dash Authority number 23627, October 26, 96, RJ Don MB 276, occupy main track, both directions in the Trident Hibbs Providence and Diamond Junction blocks, 4 blocks, 1112 to 1230. Okay, 1112 to 80 over. Okay, 1112 to 80. Thank you, Dave. Okay, dispatch check roll.
Empty ore train K320, led by a Conrail unit, threads its way past the historic Madisonville depot. The train is returning from Birmingham, Alabama. At Trident, R645, Chicago to Nashville, hustles south into Madisonville on the Old Main. Q595 passes under the US 41 bridge at Arklow. Arklow is where the Earlington Cutoff and the Old Main join back together north of Madisonville. R122 Atlanta to Chicago comes off the cutoff at Arklow. We catch the same train again between Hanson and Arklow at milepost 279. The weather is getting worse as R123 rolls by South Robards. Grain train G118 comes south by Robards with foreign power units from the Montana Rail Link and Union Pacific. It's almost dusk at the Henderson station. Q647, Chicago to Waycross, Georgia, slowly comes south around the bend, just north of the station. In 1996, an old L&N freight station in Henderson still stands. Q595, with a Morrison-Knudsen in the consist, pulls south past the station at Henderson. Grain train G601 enters the action at Henderson. We were waiting for an Evansville to Louisville train and finally caught one entering the Texas line. The symbol of this train is R553, which originated at St. Louis and its destination will be Louisville. The line running from Henderson to Louisville was charted as the Louisville, St. Louis, and Texas in 1882 and was operated as the Louisville, Henderson, and St. Louis until 1929 when it was absorbed into the L&N. The original bridge spanning the Ohio River between Evansville and Henderson was chartered in 1872, but construction didn't begin until 1881. The bridge was opened to traffic in July of 1885. All L&N trackage south of the Ohio River was converted from 5-foot gauge to 4-foot 9-inch gauge in May of 1886. Conversion from 4-foot 9 to 4-foot 8.5 inches, the present standard, was not completed until 1896. The original Ohio River Bridge at Henderson was replaced by the present span in December of 1932. Empty coal train V238 heads south across the Ohio River Bridge into Henderson, while the competition pushes some loaded coal barges below to the west. R122 pulls its train north across the river bridge in weather that is turning worse by the minute. It's almost impossible to see the north end of the bridge at this point. Assuming a camera position just south of the river bridge, we see J724 heading back to Atkinson. J724 is an Atkinson to Howell and return local. As one more northbound crosses the river, we will travel to the north side of the bridge and capture more action. R123, followed by Q647, climbs the approach to the bridge. South of Howell Yard, the Henderson Sub main rises above the endless fields of grain that stretch to the horizons. So flat is this land as a point of interest, it was necessary to begin the approach to the Ohio River far back from the river and elevate it gradually about 0.83% gradient to reach the proper height for the bridge, about 125 feet above the river's surface. The approach plus the bridge add up to 3.5 miles in length. The last stop on our tour of the Henderson will be Howell Yard in Evansville, Indiana. A southbound mixed freight exits the south end of Howell Yard. Well, watch an SW1500 kick some cars around the yard, then go up to the yard tower and watch the yard master in action as well.
Oh well, too bad. That's just the way it goes.
Boy, I hope you guys are just going to bypass or that kind of power. CSX 620. Okay. Thanks, Al.
Maybe. Over here. Yeah.
You anywhere you come over that high rail truck over? Where you at, Eddie?
It's crew change time, and a new crew takes on the switching chores. A hostler pulls light engines through the yard to the south end for some road assignments.
Another 97.
Finally, we move to the north end of Howell Yard in time to watch R123 enter the yard while the rain continues to plague one of our cameramen. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to watch the mini slideshow at the end of this program.